Good morning and welcome to our MKEA Administrator webinar, which will be focusing on reporting this morning. My name is Rose Kirschner and I'm an Implementation Associate at Teaching Strategies. I'm joined by my colleague Luke Sislevich, and he will be conducting most of the informational part of the webinar today. I will be answering questions throughout. So a good point to note right now is that I'd like you to find the questions box in the GoTo interface on the right-hand side of your screen. So if the GoTo interface has hidden on the right, you'll want to click on that little orangish arrow all the way at the top to expand the interface, and then down toward the bottom you should find the questions box. So if you can take 30 seconds to locate that, type something in the questions box so we know you can hear us and we know you've found it. Then anytime you have questions as we go throughout, type them in there. We will have a little bit of time at the end to answer some questions that come in. If there's specific to your district, then we may reply back specifically to you either during the webinar or via email later. All right, so it looks like everyone's finding the questions box, which is wonderful. We are also joined by Betsy Eads from the EEC and by Jane Myers and Nancy Ward at CES. So we're going to turn it over to them to give a little bit of a welcome, and then they will turn it back to Luke. So thank you all for taking the time out of your day to join us.
Good morning, everyone. This is Betsy Eads from the Department of Early Education and Care. Thank you all for making some time to be with us this morning. I'm sure you have a million other things that you could and maybe even should be doing, and so we really appreciate you making the time to be with us today. We're going to talk a little bit about the different reports you can run and how you can use them in Golden. We won't really have time to cover everything in an hour, but certainly you'll get a sense of the different reports that are available to you. I think as time goes on with this initiative, we really increasingly hear from teachers that the districts that MKEA and formative assessment are really working for is the districts in which the administrators are really involved and supporting the process and ensuring that the data that's collected is being used. So I think that this will be an important webinar in terms of really helping prepare you guys all to make use of the data that you've collected. I think Jane is with us from CES and is going to tell you a little bit about the resources that are available support-wise as we continue on into the school year.
Good morning. I'm Jane Myers, Project Director for the Formative Assessment Training Project at CES in Northampton. We named our project Assessment for Responsive Teaching because we're dedicated not only to providing training in formative assessment and GOLD, but in supporting you and your teachers so that ultimately teaching can become even more responsive to children's learning needs. So at CES, we are eager to provide you with ongoing follow-up support or technical assistance in GOLD and in formative assessment. Please contact us and we can send one of our experienced trainers to meet with you and your teachers to make formative assessment and the use of TS GOLD increasingly comfortable, effective, and integrated with all that you are doing. We also offer TS GOLD trainings for other staff not yet trained, including teaching assistants, and we offer other formative assessment courses as well, which are listed on our website. All the trainings and technical assistance that we provide are free of charge to you, thanks to the generous funding for this project from EEC. Remember that you should contact us to request reimbursement for substitute or stipends for kindergarten teachers' MKEA activities using the funds EEC has allocated to your district through June 2015. At the end of this webinar, a slide will present our contact information and our website address, ec-art.org. Please contact me or Emily Bouvier to request follow-up support. We look forward to hearing from you. Thank you.
Great, and we'll turn it back over to Luke to get started diving into the reports.
Great, thanks everyone. Good morning, all you out there. Thanks for joining us this morning to learn a bit more about Teaching Strategies Gold Reports. I am obviously Luke, so we'll go ahead and get started then with going over some of the Teaching Strategies Gold functionality. As Rose said earlier, she will be answering questions for me, help me out while we're going along. So if you do have any questions, please feel free to just go ahead and type those out through that question box. So here's our agenda kind of for today. We're going to try to touch on all of these. It's an ambitious agenda, but I think we'll at least be able to cover most of that during our time today. So first, we're going to go over some administrator reporting, specifically looking at three of our kind of four big ones. The other big one, I think, is the growth report. But of course, since we're just finishing the first checkpoint period of data, we don't have really two yet to run that growth report. So that's maybe a webinar for another time. But for now, we're going to look at the comparative report and the three different outcomes you can get with that: the gold readiness, Weathered expectations, and national normative sample, as well as our snapshot report and a newer report for us, which is the goals report. And we want to go into the teacher's site and look at a few of their reports quickly as well. We have the class profile report, the individual child report, and as well as a couple of reports and documents to share with families, the development and learning report and the family conference form. So when we're talking about administrative reporting, first we're going to talk about the comparative report. And when we talk about the comparative report and gold readiness, our readiness point in gold is defined as where blue meets purple but does not overlap. So when you look at our progressions and our different color bands that go with those progressions, you can see we have, of course, the rainbow, basically, Roy G. Biv there. And so where the blue meets the purple but does not overlap. So in this case, it would be level 5, would be that gold readiness benchmark. And if blue and purple start at the same level, then it's actually just that first level where they both start. But usually, for most of them, there's a clear point where blue is there and meets purple, but they are not overlapping. So it's at that level 5. Also, with our comparative report, we use what's called a scale. We have a scaled score for those comparative reports versus raw data, which we'll look at next when we talk about the snapshot report and the goals report. And so our scale with the comparative report is a uniform scale from 200 to 800 points. And scaled scores enable us to compare scores across areas of development and learning much easier, because when you think about some of our different areas, physical has 5 objectives and dimensions versus social emotional, which has 9. And so if you're trying to compare between those two areas, it's going to be more difficult to just look at the raw scores, just adding up the different objectives and dimensions, because there's just more items in social emotional. So it's really expected almost that the social emotional score might be higher than the physical score. But the scaled score allows us to easily compare between the two. A 500 in the social emotional is going to mean roughly the same thing as a 500 in physical. So you can see kind of easier where you might have some areas that need some help among your program. And as it says there as well, scale scores do take into account item difficulty. So they are weighted to keep in mind those different numbers of objectives and dimensions. So the first report that we're going to look at once we log in is going to be the comparative report, once again, and looking at gold readiness. So this is a little slide, and we can send out this. There's a document that we have that talks about all these different reports and kind of goes through these when to run it and purpose statements. So we'll send that document out after the webinar to all the attendees here, so that we can so that you have a copy of that, so you can reference that again later. It's a great resource to help you keep in mind which reports to use and when. So I'm going to go ahead and exit out of my PowerPoint here for a second and hop on over to Gold so we can run our readiness report. And I'm kind of starting here right from the very beginning. So I'm going to go ahead and log into my account for Gold.
And as Luke's logging in, I just want to answer one question that came in about the readiness point that he was talking about. Obviously, we'll see it more directly in the report, but that readiness point where blue meets purple but does not overlap, we're talking about the readiness point for beginning kindergarten. The thought is if the child gets up to that level right before the purple band starts, before they enter kindergarten, then they should be ready for the learning that happens in kindergarten.
Great. Thanks, Rose. So here we are logged in then, and I've just logged into one of our demo accounts here within Teaching Strategies Gold. And so, of course, we're going to be focusing mostly on the Reports tab today. And one other thing I want to talk about before we get into the reports themselves is administrative access at different levels. And so our demo account here actually is an organization level administrator. So this would be more actually at the level of the EEC. this is what they would see. They would see all the programs underneath them as well as sites underneath those programs. Most of you out there are going to be either program or site level admins. Program would be that district level. So if you're the Lowell administrator, at the district level, you would be a program level admin. But you could also have your different sites, which are your different buildings, within that district. And so you could have just a principal or someone who is an administrator just at that one specific site and is only running these reports then over that specific site. So those are kind of your different levels of administrative access: organization, program, and site. And so as I said, this is an organization level admin that we're looking at right now. So I'm going to go ahead then and move into my comparative report. I can select it right here. And for most of our reports within Gold, you'll see we have great support and resource sections here off to the right. And so we have different PDFs as far as like using the comparative report. There's one also for the goals report. There are some video tutorials sometimes up here. I'll show you where to find some other tutorials as well later towards the end of the presentation. And then we also have a guide that we have for administrators, and I'll show you where to find that. Most of that's within the help button. We'll go over that at the very end of the webinar today. So focusing here then on the comparative report. So the first thing to note is the areas of development and learning. By default, it selects all of the Gold areas of development and learning, but you can select just specific areas if you want to limit that report down. You then have the option to select specific programs, sites, and children. Now, since I'm an organization level admin, that's why it says programs, sites, and children. If you're a program level admin, it's going to say sites, classes, and children, and then going down from there if you're a site level admin. So when I'm selecting my children that I want to include in the report, by default it's using all children, but not including archived children. So if you had used Gold in previous years and you want to run reports on children who had been in the system and are now archived, you can go ahead and include those archived children in those reports. Or you can also just select children in certain programs and sites, so especially if you're a program level admin and you only want to run this report on a specific site, or if you're even a site level admin and you just want to run it on specific classes within your site, you can be a bit discriminating here by just selecting specific programs or sites or classes that you want to run this report on. But I'm just going to go ahead and do all of my children in the organization. Then we have our different demographic options, and this is a great way to disaggregate your data. So if you want to run reports on different breakdowns, you can break it down by gender, race, ethnicity, primary language. You have the different funding sources available that you can use to disaggregate your data. You can do a birth date range, a first day in program range, a lot of different ways that you can break down that data for when you're looking at it in your programs. And then we have our different compare to options. And so the first one that we're going to look at here is the Gold readiness. And so we have two different ways of looking at this Gold readiness. We have the kindergarten entry for pre-K children and the kindergarten entry for kindergarten children. So running this at the beginning of the year for fall data, you're probably going to be running this for your kindergarten children who are just starting to see if they've reached that readiness point. You can also run this for pre-K children kind of at the end of their pre-K year to see what their kindergarten readiness is. But since we're in the fall right now, we're going to go ahead and do kindergarten entry for kindergarten children and focus on that purple color band. So I'm going to go ahead then and select checkpoint period. I'm just going to select one where I know there's some data, and I can also, with the comparative report, select multiple checkpoint periods. So if I hold down Shift on my keyboard, I can select any adjacent checkpoint periods. If I want to move around a little bit more and select any of the periods, I can hold Control, and then I can select those other options. It's different if you're on a Mac. I believe it's the Apple key instead of Control to select different periods outside of the ones that are adjacent. I then have my option of only finalized checkpoint levels or unfinalized and finalized checkpoint levels. So your teachers, of course, when they were going through and entering their data, should have been finalizing that data once they were done. It's a good way for them to tell you as the administrator that they're done entering those ratings for the children in your program for their skills. So I'm going to run this on just finalized checkpoint levels. Now, children to compare, since I'm only selecting one checkpoint period, I can really use either of these selections, but let me explain the difference. So the first one here is children in all checkpoint periods versus children in any checkpoint period. So if I select children in all checkpoint periods, it's only going to bring up children who have data in all the checkpoint periods that I selected. So if I select fall and spring for my report, it's only going to pull up children who have data in both of those checkpoint periods. Now, if I do children in any checkpoint period, it's going to pull up a child if they have data in any of those periods that I selected. So if I selected fall and spring, but let's say the child started late, they weren't there for your fall checkpoint period, but they do have spring checkpoint data, well, then they would show up in the spring data set, but not in the fall data set. Then I have my tables option for my display type with gold readiness. And now from here I can break it down, as far as I want to go, even down to the individual child level. Since I'm an organization level admin here, that's where it starts. Otherwise, if you are, a program level admin, it's going to start at the program level and then work its way down. So I'm going to go ahead and run this down to the individual child level. And then I have two different report type options, detailed and summary. Basically, the summary is only going to show me the gold readiness data, whereas the detailed will also show me widely held expectations. So I'm going to go ahead and click View as HTML to just bring that up as a new window here in my browser. You also have the Excel option, so you can generate that as an Excel document and look at it that way if you would prefer. So here we have then our gold readiness for fall 2012-2013. So I have, first of all, my widely held expectations, since I decided to do the detailed view. So I can see here's my scale, 653 to 795 is my widely held expectation range for the area of social emotional. I had 18 children in my organization and program. They're all in the one class here. And there's their average score was 607.9, and every child in this case was below their widely held expectations. However, if you look at the gold readiness benchmark, many of those children have accomplished the gold readiness. Because as we know, that gold readiness point is where blue meets purple but does not overlap. So if the children are just below that purple color band and in that blue color band, they would still be meeting that gold readiness point. If they're just below that purple band but in that blue band, right where they kind of meet. So that's why they can be below widely held expectations but still, meeting that gold readiness point. And you can see that score that they would need to get that gold readiness point is actually below widely held expectations for the purple color band. And as you scroll down, you can see the different areas. Like this is just social emotional, then we have physical, and you can scroll down through all the different areas that you selected for the report. Now let's go back to the PowerPoint just for a second to grab our next version of the comparative report, which is widely held expectations. So this report is going to look at the children's scores in relation to our widely held expectation range, and you can run this on one color band at a time. So let's go back to our browser. And since my HTML opened in a new window, most of my settings are still saved here as far as the last version of the report that I had run. So now I can just select, I want to do widely held expectations. I need to select which color band I want to run on, and I'll use my kindergarten again, purple color band. I'm going to use the fall checkpoint period, so this widely expectation data is going to look similar because we already saw it in the kindergarten readiness. But now you see I also have two options here for display type, tables and charts. The table version, I'll run that real quick, is going to look just like it did for the kindergarten readiness point. It's going to have a table that lists out my organization, program, class, and then it has the widely expectation range, and then you can see it's basically that first part of when I looked at the kindergarten readiness, the detailed version. It's the widely expectations there. So as we scroll down, we can see each individual score for each of the different areas. Now the other way that we can look at this is the chart option. And this is a pretty neat way, I think, of looking at the data. So what this does is it basically shows us 3 lines for each area. You're going to see the lower bound of the y-level expectation range and the upper bound of the y-level expectation range, and then your actual average scaled score for your program site, whatever level you were running this report on. So this is just a nice quick way to see kind of how you're doing as a program, as a site, for those against those widely held expectations. So you can see that, in this case, the program is below widely held expectations for their kindergarten children. So that's a nice quick way of getting that summary. The next thing we're going to look at is the national normative sample. So we went through, our research department went through and looked at a national normative sample of data from children within GOLD. And it used census data to determine what that breakdown should be as far as the different demographic options for the children, and collected this national normative sample that you can then compare your children's achievements to. So I'm going to go ahead and do that national normative sample option. You can see it limits to only certain color bands, those that we had enough data to be able to create that national normative sample. This time I'm going to do 2 checkpoint periods too, because I want to show you how this changes over time with that national normative sample. And we'll run just our chart option again this time. And now that I am running over multiple checkpoint periods, this children to compare is important because it's saying now I only want children who have data in both of those checkpoint periods. So with the national normative sample, the lower bound and the upper bound are now defined by that middle 50th percentile. So basically, the score of the lower bound is where the 25th percentile starts, and then the 658, the top bound, is the 75th percentile. So that middle 50th percentile is what you're looking at here for that national normative sample. You can see then that changes as the year goes on. The fall numbers are different than the winter numbers because there's growth that's happening, and the the normative sample takes that into account. It's not just looking at widely held expectation, just a set range. It's looking at what were those scores during that particular checkpoint period. And so you can see that there's growth happening for our program, but they're still below that 25th percentile as far as that national normative sample in social emotional. In physical, it's a little bit closer. In language, they're within that 50th percentile. That middle 50th percentile. And cognitive, literacy, mathematics all looking better as well. So you can kind of see how that data compares to that national normative sample of children. All right, so let's move on from the comparative report to our snapshot report. And to do that, we're going to start talking a little bit about raw scoring. So I've mentioned this briefly before when talking about the scaled scoring. So raw scores are basically a summation of the scores for a particular, the raw score for an objective is a summation of all of the scores for the individual dimensions under that objective. So in this case, we have objective 15 with 3 dimensions, A, B, and C. If we had a child who scored 6, 5, and 5, their raw score would be 16, just summing up all of the individual dimension scores. Now, the widely held expectation range then is defined as the sum of the lower bounds and the upper bounds of the color band. So in this case, we can see that the purple color band, it ends at 8 for all 3 of these at the end of our progression. So the upper bound then, if you just sum all those together, is 24. The lower bound would be 6 plus 4 plus 4, so 14. So the widely held expectation range for objective 15 is a score of 14 to 24. And you can see our student has a score of 16, so they are within that widely expectation range for objective 15. A lot of our reports, though, are looking at the area level. And so to get the area, all you do is you sum up all of the lower bounds and the upper bounds, and that gives you your range for that area. So the widely expectation range for the purple color band for literacy is 47 to 84. And so if our student here scored all of these scores listed on the right here, we sum all those together, we get 58. They're within their widely held expectation range for that particular area. So with the snapshot report then, like the comparative report, you're going to run it after you have those finalized checkpoint levels. Unlike the comparative report, the snapshot report can only be run for one checkpoint period at a time. So let's go ahead and go back into Gold and go to our snapshot report. Some of our options here are going to look similar to you. You can see we have the standards and measures, program sites and children, demographics, some of those same sections. But one thing that's different right away is if you expand standards and measures, you can see we have not only the gold areas of development and learning, but with the snapshot report, we can also dig down even deeper. We can go to the objective level or even the individual dimension level. By default, it's using all the gold areas, but we can also, as I said, if you wanted to change it and go to the objective or dimension level. Now you have to select kind of one group of standards. So you can't do some areas and some objectives. You have to do, all of one type. So you have to do all areas or all objectives or all dimensions. And once again, you have different support articles available to you here on the report page. So I'm just going to run this on my gold areas, which is the default. Once again, I'll run it on all of my active children. My demographics, I'm going to leave the same as well. Just do all demographics. Checkpoint period, I'm going to go ahead and select one where I know there's some data. And now we have a few of our changes down here that make this different from the comparative report. Besides looking at raw data versus a scaled score, you have the format. So the format, you can change the name as it would appear on the report when you generate it. You can even upload a logo, include a subtitle. These are ways that you can customize the report to make it as something that you could give to someone, maybe outside your organization or on a board to say, here, look at this report. It has, data from our program. So we have different overviews that you can also include that help explain the report. So especially if you're giving this to someone who might not be familiar with gold, you could include some of that overview information to be, what is gold? How is this data gathered? So we have these different informations. You can even customize and put a custom overview at the beginning of the report to type out some information. So there are different things that you can include. By default, a lot of that stuff isn't included because it's just looking at, if you're running this report for yourself. The big one that is included is the profile of children included in the report. And that's a great one because it breaks down all the demographic information for you in that report. So it says, what percentage are male versus female and all the different ethnicities and those sorts of things. And then we have our two appendices. By default, all that's in there is the report criteria, so what criteria you included when generating the report. You can also include a completion rate appendix, which will show you out of a potential number of answers how many were actually completed for the children in your program. One thing I should have mentioned earlier on, but I will mention now is, and the completion rate made me think of this, because in order to be included in our reports, a child needs to have at least 70% of an area completed for them to be included in that area in the report. Now, a child could have, let's say their social emotional completely finalized, but only half, 50% of their literacy finalized. The child would then be included in the report for the social emotional, but literacy they would not be included because they don't meet that 70% threshold. So after our format options, then we have our charts and graphs. So these give us our 3 different ways that we can generate the snapshot report. Our default one is the summary by organization, program, sites, classes, and children. This is going to give us a similar look as the comparative report would have. It's going to give us that chart that breaks down the individual children, shows the site that they're from, their score, their percentage, whether they're below, median, or exceeding widely held expectations. So let me show you a different way that you can get data with the snapshot report, which is the summary by color band, which is especially useful if you have multiple color bands within your license. So if you're using this for K but also for pre-K, you could use the summary by color band option. So I'm going to go ahead and do my view as HTML here. Once again, you have that view as Excel, or also now you have a view as PDF option as well. So you can save that as a PDF. And really, what export version you use is going to depend on, what you want to do with the report. Do you want to just look at it quickly? Then I recommend using that view as HTML if you're just running this for yourself to look at. You want to save a copy, you're going to want to use the PDF or Excel options instead. Excel option is especially useful if you want to be manipulating that data in some way or changing the appearance of it. And the PDF option, good for saving as well as printing the reports. So while that's generating, let's talk a little bit about the third option for the snapshot report, which is snapshot by dimension. I'm not actually going to run it by this, but I can give you a good look at it here. There's a little sampling of it on the page right here when you're looking at choosing that option. So snapshot by dimension breaks down each of the dimensions by color band. So it will show you for each of the color bands how many children have been evaluated at each of the levels along the progression. So you can see, if you have a large number of children might be below widely held expectations, you can use this report to see, okay, well, where exactly were their skills evaluated? Like, how far below widely expectations are they? Are they just one level below? Are they right below that purple color band? Are they 3 levels below for the most part? And you can see that breakdown by using that snapshot by dimension report. So our other snapshot report has now run. So let's go ahead and use this here. So there were 50 possible children in the program, and 48 had enough gold data. So that goes back to that 70% number to be included in the report. And so we can see a breakdown then of all of our demographic information. This is also including some other color bands. So most of the children in the report are from kindergarten, but in this particular organization, this demo organization that I'm using, there are some other color bands represented. So we'll also see some data from some other color bands as well. So when we're looking at summary by color band, it just gives us each of our color bands, the widely held expectation range. Once again, looking at the raw scores. Then we get our different counts for below, meeting, and exceeding widely held expectations. So within social emotional, if you remember from our comparative report, it makes sense. All of our kindergarten children are below widely held expectations, and their average score was 32. And then we have, or there's only one child included in that social emotional. If we look later on the physical, we have some more finalized data. So we have 19 children being included there. So we have our below, and then also we have some children in our other color bands who are meeting widely held expectations. So we can see those numbers here as well. And then the percentage of the whole that represents. So there are 10 children in our preschool 3 color band. 3 of them were meeting, 7 of them were below. So our percentages there are pretty easy to figure out. So let's go ahead and move on then to our goals report. As I said, this is a newer report for us. And there are actually 2 steps involved with this, because with the goals report, you are able to create your own program-defined goals. So I can see here I already have a few goal sets created in this account. And once again, we have a nice support document over here to help you with using the goals report. If you need additional support after the webinar, that's one place you can find it. I'm going to go ahead and create a new goal set to go through that process with you. So the first thing when creating a new goal set is you're going to want to select which color band should this goal set be associated with. After I've selected my color band, I then select which objectives and dimensions I want as part of this goal set. Keep in mind that you want to limit these goal sets, objectives, and dimension numbers to smaller amounts. You don't want to do the entire, every area or something like that. This should be probably around 12 or so different items to include in these different goal sets. So if you have a specific goals, maybe you have some children who have IEPs, you want to create IEP goals. That's one thing you could do. Or if you have just specific goals along the progression that you want to reach, maybe you want to reach the middle of the purple color band by the end of the year, that's your goal. You can set those different goals here within your creating the program defined goal sets. So after I've selected which objectives and dimensions I want to include, I click submit. Then I would need to name my goal set so I can find it again when I am running my report. And then I would need to select for each of the dimensions that I chose what level along the progression is my goal. So if my goal is the middle of the purple color band, I can set that very easily because I can see the color band. I can see those wide expectations here. This one only has 2 levels, so I'll select at this point the end of the purple color band. But that's how I can set my goals. So now when I create this goal set, I'll be able to run a report that already pulls those specific objectives and dimensions that are in that goal set. So I don't have to go through, like when you looked at the snapshot report, you could select specific objectives and dimensions, but if you already have these goals defined, you don't have to go through and select those every time. You can just select the goal set that you're interested in. So let's go back and look at our goal sets here. So if I wanted to view one of my goal sets to see what I had set, I can go ahead and click the little radial button to the right of that particular goal set and click View. Now I can see that this is a pre-K 4, a blue color band goal set. And I can see that my goal was 6, 4, and 5. So basically the beginning of the blue color band for those 3 dimensions.
And Luke, we did have a question that came in that we can just clarify as we're looking at the goals report because it is so new and this is probably the first time many of you have ever seen it before. The goal sets really can be defined by you. So you can create a goal set for a particular child. If they have an IEP, you can make it specific, just to language and literacy. If they have a speech and language IEP, and you could set goals for them and then be able to run this report, which Luke will do in a minute, based on those goals that you have for that individual child. You could also create custom goal sets for classes, programs, or your entire district. I know Luke showed you earlier what our gold readiness benchmark is for the beginning of kindergarten. But you in your district or your school may have other goals that you expect students to come into kindergarten with, or you could do one for later in the school year. It really depends on kind of what you want to do with this report. There's a lot of options available. So this allows you to set your own goals rather than using just either the gold readiness benchmark or the widely held expectations. So there's a lot of different options on this report, which is really exciting.
Yeah, thanks, Rose. Yeah, a lot of possibilities for you when running this particular report and creating these different goal sets. And as Rose was saying, you can create a goal set for an entire program or a specific site. And the next thing I want to show you is sharing, which is what you can do then with a goal set that you maybe created as one administrator, but you want all of your administrators to have access to that particular goal set. And so all you would do is you would just select the goal set that you want to share and click that share button. And then what that does is it shares it with all administrators of a similar level and then above. So if I'm a particular site level administrator and I have a goal set that I'm creating for my building, for my site, and I want to share it with all of the other administrators in my site, I can share that goal set, and then we'll also share it with my program level administrator so they have access to look at that particular goal set for my site as well. But it will not share it with the other sites in your program. It'll just be within your specific site. But if you have a program level administrator who creates a goal set, for the whole district, when they share that goal set, it will share with every single administrator in every single site underneath that district. So you have those different share options to kind of disseminate that goal set to everyone else. So let's go ahead and run the goals report really quickly here, just to take a quick look. All right, so once again, a lot of this looks very familiar. We have our program sites and children to select, our demographics, and then we have our program defined goal to select. So I'm just going to select that one that we were looking at before for that pre-K 4. And it's not making us select a color band because it is a pre-K 4 goal set. It's only going to pull those children who are in that blue color band. And you can select multiple checkpoint periods for this particular report, but all the checkpoint periods do have to be within the same year. And then our display type is tables. And then once again, we have our report level that can go all the way down to the individual child level. So once again, I'm doing my view as HTML option because I just want to be able to look at this quickly. I don't need to save this or share it with anyone else, so I'm not going to use the Excel option in this case. And while that's running, I actually move over. We'll be switching to our teacher reporting after this. So we'll be taking a look at going back to the PowerPoint in a second after we generate this report. And the goals report time will vary given a couple of different factors, one of those being the number of goals that you've set. That's one reason why we say you should probably keep those goal numbers a little bit on the lower side as opposed to having huge numbers of objectives and dimensions in one goal set, as well as the number of children within your program. So if you have a large number of children, it might take a little bit longer for that goals report to generate. It also is going to vary on the level that you go down to. So if you're going down to the individual child level, or if you're sticking with the site level or class level, it might take less time if you're running at a higher level. And I apologize for the delay here. It looks like our goals report is being a little stubborn this morning, but we'll let it give it a little bit more time here to load, and then we'll move on to look at our teacher reports. Just a few of those very quickly.
I can answer just a couple of questions that have come up as we have a pause here. One big question that has come up is, are we recording today's webinar? And I meant to mention that in the introduction. Yes, today's webinar is being recorded. It should be posted to your Gold homepage within 2 weeks. We also have the handy reports when and why handout that many of you probably got at the MKEA conference. But for those of you who missed it, we will be sending that out. As Luke mentioned, it includes a lot of the information from the PowerPoint of when and why to run each report. I think those were the two big ones that had come in so far. I know we have a couple questions for Betsy that we can come back to at the end.
Great, thanks, Rose. Well, I think we might just go ahead and move on for now, just to go on and look at those teacher reports. And I apologize that the goals report doesn't seem to be generating right now, but we'll come back to that maybe towards the end and give it a little time to run. Maybe that'll help in the background. So what I need to do now as an administrator to look at some of these teacher reports, what I'm going to do is actually log in as if I were one of the teachers. So let me show you how to do that right away too. So if I go to my administration tab, go to manage users, teachers and administrators. I'm just going to look at the list of teachers. Since I don't have very many in my organization as a whole, this is easy enough for me to do. You could also, go to a specific site or program just to look at the teachers and administrators within that particular site. So I'm going to go ahead and log in as Juan here. So it's already set this drop down to access site as this user. So I can just go ahead and click go. And now I'm logged in as if I were Juan. So I'm seeing his teacher site the same as he would. So just to look at a couple of reports here, let's start with the class profile, which I think is something that's very useful for teachers and can be run, during the checkpoint period as well. It doesn't have to be run just at the end because you can include preliminary levels. That's one of the big differences between some of these teacher reports and the administrator reports is that teacher reports, at least the main three that we're going to look at today, the class profile, individual child, and development and learning, can all be run with preliminary data. And preliminary data are those levels that are entered by the teacher when they're entering in documentation. So it's not the checkpoints, not the finalized checkpoint levels, it's those preliminary levels. So I'm just going to go ahead and quickly run this report so we can take a look. I'll include just our checkpoint levels, do my HTML version. And so you can see this is just a nice quick look at where the children were evaluated for that particular checkpoint period along the progression. So as a teacher, I can easily see where those skill groups are, where those children who were evaluated at similar levels are falling. So I can use this to help with my small group planning to figure out, which children I want to try to put together when I'm working with them. Do I want to, group together children of similar skill levels, or bring in children who a few children who are higher skill levels so that they can help those other children develop their skills more. So this just is a great way to look at all the dimensions and see very quickly where the children are falling along that progression. And then we have our individual child report. And so this report can be run on one child. It can also be run on multiple children at once. And basically, if you select multiple children, it's just going to run it on one child. And then once that child's done, it just goes right into starting the next child. And if you use like the PDF export version of the report, then it actually has the page breaks built in so that you don't have one page that has half of one child's data and half of another child's data on it. So let's go ahead and just select just a few children here. Select our different checkpoint periods. That's one thing about the individual child report that's different than the class profile report. Besides being just on one child, you can also run it over multiple checkpoint periods. So if I want to see that child's growth over time, I can see that on this individual child report. By default, it includes all the objectives and dimensions, at least you select specific ones. So I'm just going to leave that alone. I'm going to once again do this on checkpoint levels and do my HTML output. And actually, as an administrator, you can also run this individual child report under your reports tab as well. You don't have to log in as a user to see this report as you would with like the class profile or the development and learning report. So now I can see, very easily that child's development. So I can see the fall, winter, spring, where those evaluations were happening, where the child was below wild expectations. But then pretty much every period there was growth, for this child in social emotional anyway. Even when they started 2 levels below wild expectations in 1C here, they managed to get in within wild expectations by the spring. So this can be used to help with that individual child planning. So if I look at this in the fall, I could see these 4 dimensions very quickly are the ones that I might need to focus on a little bit more, because that child is below wild expectations in those dimensions versus some of the other ones where they were already within their wild expectations. I mean, I started to move on and help with those particular dimensions. So the last report I want to look at is the Development and Learning Report. And so the Development and Learning Report is a great report also for sharing with families. I know some districts have been using this for a report card as well up to this point. And we are working on a new report card as well. We don't have anything to show you for that today, but that is something else that we're working on, is a new report. So I'm going to go ahead and select, I'll just do one child this time. Once again, you can select multiple children like you could with the individual child report. You can also select one or multiple areas of development and learning. And I'm going to go ahead and do just checkpoint levels. And then I have a couple of show options here. It says objective and dimension numbers are not recommended when sharing with parents. And that's mostly because it's just another thing on the report that might confuse people. If they're not familiar with what does 1A mean, it might just be a little too much information. So we can leave those off when sharing with parents. And we can also put on recommended activities, though. So when I'm running the report, I included the dimensions just so that you could see where that tie-in is. So this text then is basically taken directly from the progression. It's just looking at what level was selected and then taking the identifier and putting that text into the report. So where you see like is beginning to, that means the child was evaluated at one of those in between or emerging levels, the odd numbers on the progression. So they're beginning to do whatever the next indicator is. And then like 2B here is an indicator itself, identifies basic emotional reactions of others and their causes accurately. So this is looking at the child's skills currently and also what the next skill is that we're looking for. So what is next along that progression for that child? What are we moving towards and working toward with that child? And then the recommended activities are great because if you look at this on the computer and you can share this with family members online, they can just click the name of the activity and it actually opens up the activity and inserts the child's name in there as well. So you can just view that activity right there. You can print it very easily, save it as a PDF. You can also, of course, save if your parents don't have access to Gold, or if you want to just share this with them at a conference of some kind, then you can also just print out and save those activities individually. So the last thing we kind of wanted to talk about today was the family conference form. The big difference between this and the development learning report is that you can select specific objectives and dimensions to include in the form, and also the text is editable. So it's defaulting to the current checkpoint period where there was no data. That's why it said that there was no data available. And so basically you can just kind of click to begin in the different areas and select the specific objectives and dimensions that you want to include. And if you had documentation that you wanted to include as well, you could include that on the form. Sorry, I'm going a little fast through this. I know we're running out of time here, so I want to make sure that we have some more time for questions and that sort of thing as well. But then you can also edit the text. So if you want to, if you're saying, well, this doesn't quite capture what I wanted to say, or maybe this might not be enough explanation for a family member, I can add more to it. I can edit it to make it make more sense for what the child is able to do and make it easier to understand perhaps for a family member who might not understand what it means to be able to look at a situation differently or delay gratification. All right, so the last thing I want to show very quickly in Gold here is just where to find additional support. So as Rose mentioned, we are recording this webinar and that will be posted. We also have a lot of other recorded webinars up already. If you go to the Help button in the upper right-hand corner and you go down, scroll down to where it says Recorded Webinars. Now if I click here, I'm only seeing the teacher ones because I'm currently on the teacher side, but you can see I have these two at the top here. These recorded orientations are great resources. And I'm not just saying that because it's my voice on them either, but they're great resources for teachers. And we also have some for administrators as well. So if you could have the two there, and if I switch back to my login as an administrator and go to that help button, I can go down again to my recorded webinars, and once again has the teacher ones here, but also has the 3 different ones for administrators, and you can see what the focus is for each of those. And if you click view, it gives you a bit more of an explanation as far as what's gone over in that particular orientation. And also in the help library, we have a lot of those support articles that I was pointing out to you on the right side of the pages. We're looking at each of those reports. So you also have those great resources available to you from the help button. At the bottom of most pages in gold also, we have our Contact Us link. And so this is a way you can get contact information for teaching strategies. You can see our tech support phone number and email address there. But those are the more general ones as well. I'm going to pull up the PowerPoint again now to pull up that final slide that Jane was mentioning that has some additional contact information. So if you need Gold Online support, we have a dedicated email address that we've set up for Massachusetts programs. That's magold@teachingstrategies.com. And then we have Jane Myers and Emily Bouvier's contact information up there as well for if you have questions on MKE training or you want in-person technical assistance.
Thank you, Luke. I know we have just a couple of minutes left. I know I was able to answer most of the questions that came in throughout. A couple of them I did want to kind of answer aloud. A couple of them are for Betsy. So Betsy, you can unmute your microphone and answer some of kind of the more EEC focused questions. One is, what data is the state looking at in gold?
Okay, thanks, Rose. So I want to focus that on this data is really first and foremost for teachers to use in their classroom to inform interactions with students, to help them planning lessons, to help them have great conversations with parents about what students are learning and what they need to work on. Secondly, it's for administrators at schools to use, to really look at what students know to help support teachers in terms of where they might need some support if students are really lagging in certain areas. The state at this point has not really been looking at the data because we've really felt that it is teachers have needed time to learn. We are checking to ensure that districts have completed the checkpoint, and if we see a district with far fewer students there than we would expect, we would be in touch to just offer some support and make sure that you didn't need additional training or technical assistance. The state is looking to hire someone or consult with someone just to kind of get a sense of the reliability of the data, what we might be able to glean from this data. There is no intention to look at this data at the individual classroom or student level. At this point, we're looking at the district level simply to see if the checkpoint is done, but it's really, the state does hope to look at the data just in aggregate. But first and foremost, this data is for the teachers and their students to use in their classrooms.
Great. One other question for you, Betsy, is my district is considering using gold as part of our DDM. Do you have recommendations from the EEC of how to best use the data in gold for a purpose such as a DDM?
Yeah, that's a good question, and it's come up several times in the last several months. The EEC does not recommend at this point that districts use formative assessment or gold specifically as a DDM. It's not really designed for that. There is nothing that would prevent you from doing it. We simply don't recommend it. We do think that gold can be really helpful, or formative assessment can be really helpful in terms of providing teachers support, looking at what sorts of professional development you might want to provide, but we don't recommend its use as a DDM.
Great, thank you. I think just a couple other small questions that had come in about gold in general. What report should we be using as a report card before the gold report card comes out. I know Luke had mentioned that, and many of you who were at the conference also heard me mention that gold is developing a report card that will be available later in the spring for use in the fall next year. I know that many programs choose to wait for using gold as a report card in their first year. Some programs are using the individual child report, and some programs are using the development and learning report. At Teaching Strategies, we really recommend the development and learning report. It's a great way to really explain and make it clear to families what their children can do and what they'll be able to do next. But certainly the individual child report provides a lot of information. It just needs to have a little bit of explanation before just sending that home with families. Another question that came in was, can reports from Gold, can they interface with our other district reporting systems? We do have a way for you to export your gold data for your school or your district, and you I know that's included in some of the recorded webinars. If you want to learn more about how to export gold data, you can certainly shoot us an email at magold@teachingstrategies.com, and we can point you in the direction for that. I know many of you won't really be to that point until the end of the year, but some of you may want to pull or export your fall data out at this time. And I think we answered most of the other questions. I know a couple have come in, but we are also just in the last couple of minutes, but we are also running short on time. And so any questions that we did not answer, we can follow up with you via email, or certainly feel free to contact us back as well. But thank you all for joining us today, and we will be posting a recording of this webinar within a couple of weeks on your Gold homepage. And thank you, Luke, for presenting.
Thank you. Yeah, my pleasure.
Have a great rest of the day, everyone, and happy holidays.